Hello, beautiful people. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to Your Spiritual Guru podcast. I'm your host and spiritual guru, Erin. I've been on my own spiritual journey for the past 2 years, and it's an honor to walk beside you as you navigate through your own. This podcast is for anyone who is wanting to do inner work, get more in tune with themselves, heal past traumas, and find their inner power. If that's you, then sit tight because this is going to get deep. You ready? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Your Spiritual Guru podcast. I hope you are having a great week. And if you're listening to this when it comes out, it is Friday. The week is over. And it's crazy because this week leading up to today, I had a completely different idea of what this topic was going to be for when I recorded this podcast today. And then I got asked a question and it kind of just, threw me for a loop, and I was like, I should probably do my episode on this. It was because it happened today. Like, today was the day that I knew that I was going to have to record my podcast because I work tomorrow and then I'm off Friday, but the podcast, drops on Friday. And someone asked me this question like 2 days, so I just thought that was a sign. But anyway, the question that I was asked was, have you ever felt like you weren't living? Like your mind is just running away from you? And at first I was kind of confused by the question, so I had to ask for clarity. I was like, do you mean weren't living as in you were kind of just going through the motions and like you weren't really playing an active role in your life? Like life was just kind of, passing you by and you weren't really an active participant? And they were like, yeah, like kind of, disassociation. And I was like, absolutely, I've been there. And so they were asking me, what my advice was for, when you're in that kind of state. And honestly, the advice that I gave was find your purpose. Now, that is a big task, right? That's a big, that's easier said than done. People hear, find your purpose, and they like the most common question, or the one at least that I asked for myself when I was trying to find my purpose is, okay, where do I start? And so kind of just to give y'all a backstory, y'all have heard like bits and pieces of this story, but it kind of like comes all together in this instance because, as I mentioned, like I moved from my hometown and I immediately started going to college. Then, I took a break from college because I was like going back and forth with my majors, and I started working, and I started in retail, and I was in retail for 11 years, I think. And, I just kept, sitting with myself and being like, Erin, what are you doing? Like, you came here to go to college. You don't have a degree. You didn't finish college. You're working, but like you're stressed all the time. You remember I told you I was working for Victoria's Secret, and that's when like my anxiety attacks started, coming up, and that's when my anxiety really like got bad and kind of manifested and all of those things. And it's just like, Erin, what are you doing? Like, this obviously isn't what you want to do in life. This isn't your passion. This isn't, you're basically just going through the motions, like I said earlier. And the thing that I asked myself when I really sat down and I was like, okay, what are you going to do with your life? Like, where is this going? Because it's really hard when you have so many options. There's so many things that you can do, that you can try, that you can experiment with, that you can explore. You have so many options, and so sometimes that paralyzes people because they just can't decide, And so I had all of these ideas of like all of these things that I could do, but I asked myself this question: Was there a time in your life that you felt like you knew exactly what you were doing, you were passionate about what you were doing, you enjoyed doing it, and you were good at it? And when I asked myself that, the answer was obvious. It was back in high school when I was in my first responder class, like I told y'all a few episodes back. And remember, I told you that was my favorite class. I was excited about what I was learning. I was good at it. I was retaining all of this information. It was fascinating to me. I enjoyed it. I was good at it. And I was like, duh, like that's it. That's where I need to go. And so from there, I started going to, back to college for that. And then, kind of fast forward, I saw an opportunity to join this company that was hosting an EMT recruit class. And it was paid. It was a shortened class. So instead of, me going to college for, I think it would have been 2 years, I think, to finish that degree, I could take this course for 6 weeks, get paid while I'm learning this stuff, and then I was guaranteed to have a job right after graduation as long as I passed the National Registry. And so I was like, that's a no-brainer. Like, sign me up. Where do I sign? And so that's what happened. Now, here's the kicker. So it's possible to find your purpose and your passion and do it. But sometimes it doesn't always look the way that you pictured it. And sometimes you can be faced with the decision of, okay, is this really not what I'm supposed to be doing? Did I just think that this was what I was supposed to be doing? Or do I just need to pivot a little bit? Still stay on the same course, but pivot. And so that's kind of what happened with me. So I got with this company and I really enjoyed it. I was like, holy shit, like I'm doing this thing. Like I'm an EMT. Like this is what I was meant to do. This is my purpose. Like I'm in it, And then that company, that environment started to be very draining for me. And I could tell that the enthusiasm and the passion and the love and the desire that I had for this profession was slowly starting to diminish because of, being in that company and just the way that things were working there. And it was turning me into a different person. I could feel myself becoming meaner, more tired and exhausted all the time, not doing things for me, not filling my own cup up, just being very negative, and just not someone that I wanted to be, someone that I had worked very hard not to be, right? And so I had to make a decision. Is it the profession or is it this company? And I can just pivot because there's tons of other EMS companies that I could be affiliated with and go from there. So the latter is what I decided to do. I switched EMS companies and everything was great. There was, some hesitation because in order to be affiliated with this new EMS company, I would also have to get my fire certs. And fire is really not something that I anticipated having in my story with this profession, right? It was never something that I saw myself doing, right? Like I was not interested in fire at all in the slightest. But for me, the decision wasn't, do I do fire or do I not do fire? The decision was, do I stay with this company and this environment that is draining me, that is bad for my mental health? Or do I take a chance and try something that I maybe did not anticipate or didn't plan on, but that this environment may be better for my well-being and my mental health? You know, that was the decision that I had to make. It had nothing to do with the profession. It was about me. And so I say all that to say, sometimes when you have found your purpose, it's not always smooth sailing from that point. Sometimes you have to reevaluate and pivot. And then down the line, you have to reevaluate and pivot again, and so on and so forth. Now, as far as finding your purpose, that's where I started, right? Asking myself, where was a time where you felt good about what you were doing, you enjoyed it, you felt competent and confident in it, and you know, you loved doing it, right? You enjoyed it. But in order to do that, that takes a certain level of, one, awareness, but also discipline. Because you have to be disciplined enough to be able to sit with that question and really think about you. Not what your parents want, not what your sister, your aunt, your brother, your boyfriend, your husband, your significant other, society, what anybody else wants, or what anybody else thinks that you should be doing, right? It takes sitting with yourself and asking yourself, what do you want? What makes you happy? What do you want to do? What are you good at? And that's hard to do sometimes, because depending on how you grew up, especially, you know, your parents, the household that you grew up in, most people have parents who have influenced them in some ways, influenced their decision making, and have put ideas in their head as far as the career or the life that they should be living or that they should be doing, right? And so you kind of have to silence the noise, right? The outside opinions, all of that, and focus on what it is that you want. It takes being able to silence all of that so that you can listen to that inner voice in your head and in your heart. And that's not always easy to do. Okay? So, for me, how I was able to kind of do that and stick to it is just step by step, day by day, I started making decisions for myself, small or big, it didn't matter. But what that does is it builds your confidence and it builds your intuition and your trust within yourself to say, hey, I trust my gut, I trust my intuition, and I trust where it leads me. And I trust myself to make sound decisions for myself and my well-being without the input of anybody else. Right? It takes work. Because, again, depending on how you grew up, it's really, really hard to silence those little voices in your head from your parents or your grandparents or your friends or your husband or your boyfriend or your significant other or your job or society in general, all of that. There's a lot of noise around us all the time. And just like, that's what I was saying in I think my last podcast, or maybe the episode before that, that stimulation, right? We're always surrounded by noise, opinion, stimulation of some sort. It takes a lot of discipline for us to be quiet and sit in silence. It's uncomfortable. And a lot of people don't like to be uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable, right? But honestly, that's where I kind of got most of my epiphanies, and that's where I started to really learn myself intimately and be able to have that trust and confidence in myself to make those kind of decisions and to stand by them, and not let people's doubts and negativities and their stories and their, oh, well, my Aunt Karen Susan's friend did that and they had a bad experience, and I just don't think that that's a good, all of that. Like, no, I'm able now to make decisions. Yeah, I will take people's opinions into consideration, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sway my decision in the long run, because at the end of the day, I know I'm making this decision for myself and I trust myself to make that decision, right? So, all of that to say, finding your purpose, it's not a one and done kind of thing. It's hard to get there. Well, it can be, depending on where you're at, emotionally, being in tune with yourself and all of that. It can be hard to get there. But once you find it, like I said, it's not a one and done thing. Sometimes you have to reevaluate and pivot and reevaluate and pivot again. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily not on the right path. That doesn't mean that you chose the wrong passion or the wrong purpose. It just means that sometimes the environment isn't right. But the good thing about it is you're not a tree. You can move, you can pivot, you can change your environment. You have control over that. So I want to end this podcast episode with a quote. It's literally one of my favorite quotes to this day. It's a quote by Howard Thurman, and it reads, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." That's all I have for y'all this week. Until we meet again, namaste.